It's really good. I'm glad to have you here in the studio.
Thank you for the invitation, Harold.
We did that piece way back, it must have been about 3 or 4 years ago at the house.
Right.
And things were just getting started.
Right.
In a way. They've certainly grown.
Very much.
And we want to fill myself and the audience in and out where they stand. And welcome. Welcome very much to Conversation. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Les Jamieson. And Les Jamieson is very much one of the members, founding members, I might say, among others, of the New York 9/11 Truth Movement. And it's grown in great dimensions since last we met him a while ago when he and his colleagues were getting it started. But he's got a great story to tell. It's a very interesting one, and it's becoming more and more relevant, I think, in a political context. And Les, welcome. Very, very much glad you could come in. I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Glad to be here, Harold. Thank you.
I wonder if you could. It's my way I do things here. We've got a couple of roll-ins. We're going to try and hope they show. They'll run okay and everything that you have. But I wonder if you could just share your own background, please. Education, born and raised, that sort of thing as a way to wade into it. Then we can talk some about this 9/11 Truth Movement that's getting such legs now.
Yeah, very good. Well, I was born in the country of Panama and came here at a very young age, 4 years old, and raised in the Hartford area in Connecticut. So I grew up there and went to college in Boston, where I became a musician.
Okay.
I studied for music. And I spent most of my adult professional life working as a professional guitarist and vocalist. And upon coming to New York in the mid-'80s, actually, then I took on another profession, which is computers, basically focusing on creative aspects of graphics, computer graphics, and web design.
Boy, there's a lot there. And I wanted to interrupt you right at the beginning. Some people say I interrupt too much, but the trouble is, there's too many interesting things. Your first 4 years, the most formative years, were in Panama.
Yes.
Panama City, Cologne, there's the Panama, right? Your
Yes.
father was in the military or something?
Correct, correct.
Oh, correct, okay. You were a military family. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And my mother is Panamanian, and so that's part of the story there. We were in a province right next to Costa Rica, about 6 to 8 hour drive out of.
Oh, I see. You weren't at the canal.
Right, right.
Yeah.
No, we were out in the country.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, yes. So, yeah, that's a little bit about that history. And
I drove through there in 1963, 64.
yes,
I drove from Detroit to La Paz, Bolivia, in the 10-year-old Pontiac. It was great. Costa Rica is beautiful, and Panama was really interesting. That was your formative years. You don't remember it or anything very much, but it was interesting. You had that background, yeah? And then I didn't know, Les. I didn't know that you were a musician. I've always thought of you as being, you know, these other things. But music and composition, singing is something important to you, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, okay,
and,
good.
Guitar. And,
do you gig out around in clubs
well,
and stuff?
I did for many, many years.
Too busy
and,
now, I bet.
Way too busy.
Yeah.
The last 8 years or so. First
Yeah.
with computing work, and then the last 3 years plus with the movement. So no, I don't perform professionally anymore.
Yeah, I know, because you're so busy and you really you hold it together in a very real way. You're like the Rock of Gibraltar in a sea of a great deal of of activity and that sort of thing. And you're very solid, and you're right there holding it together. Down at St. Mark's Church, that sort of thing you're doing now, those things. But I also heard you say you went to school just to get it down.
Yeah, Berklee College of Music in Boston.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
You studied composition and that sort of thing?
Jazz guitar,
Jazz
and
guitar.
arranging.
My man won the Pulitzer. My friend Ornette Coleman won the Pulitzer for jazz.
Yes.
You know, just yesterday it was announced. I was proud of him. That's really good. So you're into that. So, but you become very identified with this 9/11 Truth thing in the last few years.
Right. Well, the events of 9/11, of course, change all our lives, and since then it's been all-consuming for the most part, and especially since 2004, when I became active on a regular basis. The morning of 9/11, there we were all, watching the TV, and I had an instinct or an intuition right then that there was something wrong with the official story, the way these 4 airliners could be hijacked simultaneously, and the fact that none of them were intercepted. I just had an instinct, Harold, that
you did right on that very day.
There's no way that our very sophisticated, expensive military intelligence could not have known. That was my instinct. And then was standing there in front of the TV as the towers were burning, saying to myself, wow, it's a good thing these could never fall. The fires were just not that big. And of course they collapsed. So that was bizarre, and it just started from there.
Yeah.
And
you had all that that intuitive. You sent that. Did that come out of any special understanding you had? Your dad was in the military. Do you have any
not
understanding
really.
of military?
No,
nothing.
just you know, being political.
Had you been political before that?
Yeah, I had for many years.
Had you been involved in would be called? They have a term. Sometimes it's thought of derisively as conspiracy, like the JFK thing and that kind of thing. Were you of a conspiratorial mind about the government and the system?
I had studied a little bit, but also being a child of the '60s during the Vietnam era, and then becoming aware of the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which was a false flag and a manufactured incident in order to launch war. So I knew of that history, but nothing would have prepared me for the flood of information that would open up after learning about 9/11 and really coming to understand what 9/11 really was about. So then a few months after, in November, I was listening to
November of 2001.
2001,
right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
Listening to WBAI, and I heard a man who you know have come to know quite well, Ralph Showman.
Ralph Showman's great.
His show Taking Aim, and he had already put it together. He had a show on right then and there called The Underlying Politics of 9/11, where he spoke about Project for New American Century.
Right.
He spoke about.
Maybe you could spell that out a little.
Yeah.
Maybe the Project for New American Century.
Right. It's the ultra-conservative right-wing think tank called Project for New American Century. If you go to the website newamericancentury.org, you click on the link for publications. You download a document called Rebuilding America's Defenses. You read this document, and it talks about this agenda to create a military transformation, to establish dominance, preeminence over all the lands, all the planet's oil and natural resource areas.
All they ask is they want full spectrum dominance?
Exactly. That was one of their
terms. Not only
terms.
the Earth, but also from space, I
That
believe.
includes space, and that includes
That's all they ask.
That includes the U.S., by the way. Full spectrum. And
that
leads
went back
into
to
the
when
Patriot
was
Act.
that put together?
Well, I think a lot of that was written throughout the 90s. In 1997 or 98, a document very similar was presented to President Clinton as a pretext to invade Iraq.
Yeah, it could have been.
For regime change.
I believe Mr. Wolfowitz has been into invading Iraq since the 70s.
Yes.
He saw that as a keystone issue,
Right, and the members of this think tank are Dick Cheney, Don Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz, Richard Pearl, John Bolton, Douglas Feith, Jeb Bush, William Kristol.
William Kristol's member?
Yes.
He signed on to that, what do you call it again, that statement?
It's called Rebuilding.
No, but the thing before that.
Project for New American Century.
Right,
yes,
right.
He's a member. He's a founding member, exactly.
Okay.
So these are the neocons.
Neocons,
and many of these names are the ones that took power in 2000, the election of 2000, which if you study, Greg Palast has done a lot of groundbreaking research on this. The election in Florida was stolen. Al Gore should have won that election,
and
so this was a coup. And then 9/11 was also another coup. And
it was a coup, the 2000 election.
Absolutely.
Greg did that. He did that, and also what's his name? Who's that friend? Danny Schechter. Has done good documentary on that.
Exactly.
But Greg he's got the title "The Best Democracy Money Can Buy."
Yes. And he went to Florida and did research on this company called Checkpoint, which is the database company that cleaned the rolls, basically went through the voter rolls, and there were like 90,000 people, most of them African American. Many were labeled as having been felons, which could not work, and so many of them, this was false information. So he proved definitively that was a stolen election, and there's more on that. So that was a coup. These are the people, the Project for New American Century people, that seized power under, George W. And a year later, after this statement came out, Rebuilding America's Defenses, which, by the way, it also said that in order to accomplish their agenda for full spectrum dominance, the American people would only support this if there were to be a new Pearl Harbor.
Because it was so extreme.
It was so extreme, right. And what do you do when you have this agenda to send your people into war in what they call, what Dick Cheney has said word by word here, wars last in generations, wars that may not end in our lifetime. When you have that agenda, you have to have a catastrophic event to traumatize people, galvanize their support, to anger them, to make them think they're being attacked, which is the same pattern that we see from the Hermann Göring statement in the Nuremberg trials, when he said, it's easy to send a country to war, just tell them they're being attacked and denounce the peacemakers as being unpatriotic.
Yeah, that's right. The big lie. And if you're going to lie, lie big.
Lie big.
And that you can get away with that more than you can a little on the margins.
Exactly.
And also it goes back to the, I remember you had a thing at St. Mark's where David Ray Griffith gave a talk.
Yes.
And I was just fishing around. I didn't know and everything. You were way ahead of me in that sort of thing. But he gave the talk. I went right home.
Yes.
I went right home and got down William Shire's Rise and Fall of the Third Reich as a way of getting in a pattern way. And it was involved, the Nazis were involved in the burning of the Reichstag in 1933.
Right, yes.
They put up a patsy, but they were involved in that as a way of gaining power, and by 1937 it was 97% approval of that fascist dictator.
Yes, so what we see here is a pattern, a modus operandi. When a nation wants to send their country to war, they will create a manufactured incident and then manipulate the people, and this is, you know, probably the most profitable venture, one of the top three most profitable ventures, the other being banking, the other being oil and energy, that, you know, the making of war is one of the most profitable ventures in existence, and this is what nations have done you know, throughout history. Time immemorial.
It seems that way.
And the U.S., it's important to know, Harold, there's a document on the net, if you Google how to start a war.
How to start a war,
It talks about our wars going back to 1848, the Mexican-American War, and everyone there. Polk, yes. So 9/11 is nothing different, and for people new to this information, I just ask them these questions.
Yeah, that's something we. There'll be people who are going to be very find it outlandish, but you understand that.
Yes, of course, of course. So I would ask somebody who is new to this information. Well, if you consider all the lies that we've been told about the reasons for invading Iraq, the WMD, the yellow cake for Niger, the aluminum tubes, and others, they've all been lies. Now, also, if you consider the lies that we were told that the U.S. does not engage in torture, that the U.S. Only gets court orders before they will tap your phone or surveil you, these are all lies. When you add the lies about...
and there are, whatever was there, and by a rule of law, to protect those things are being eroded very dangerously and very alarmingly with rapidity.
Due to 9/11.
Right,
you know? So there's a couple more lies I want to list here.
Okay.
The lie saying that whoever got caught revealing the name of the CIA agent, Valerie Plame, would immediately be fired. Also, here's another one, who, let's see, George Bush himself said, no one knew the levees would break in New Orleans. You know, and there are
lots
more.
of people who had
there are more. So given these lies, these monumental lies, what's to make anyone think that we've been told the truth about 9/11?
We haven't told the truth. Yeah, it was Roosevelt, I think, had some knowledge about the coming of Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
And the people, most people, human beings, don't want to go to war.
No.
For the interests of a few people who are going to make a lot of money from it, and they've got their own geopolitical strategy, and they're the leaders. And so they either... And the leaders, because we don't live in democracy, we don't live in that kind of a thing, we live in a plutocracy, and the people have to be, well, you can coerce people, you know, if you have a situation where they have near slave status or something, you don't have to bother trying to co-opt them or to trick them or to, you know, spin things in order to go that way. But people do that. They had the Gulf of Tonkin thing they did in Vietnam to get us into that. They had the bombing of Pearl Harbor. The nation wasn't ready to go to war. But the leaders said the people, poor things, just don't understand that we have to do this. in the sense that Roosevelt may have been right, but that was that kind of thing.
Well, yeah.
They'll do that
Yeah.
in order to affect public opinion. BR is more and more important, where you have some quasi-freedom of speech and so forth.
Behind all of these
Yeah.
Machinations, though, are
Machinations.
always very, very large commercial interests.
All right.
There's always commercial interest. With 9/11, I'll list two. Afghanistan, the oil pipeline. There was a deal that was being worked on by Unical because there was thought to be huge resources around the Caspian Sea.
I think there are.
The only way to get out the oil and gas resources would be through a pipeline going straight through Afghanistan to the Indian Ocean, and this is all documented.
Well, it's got to go through Pakistan.
No,
It can't go Afghanistan. Afghanistan doesn't touch the sea. But yeah, it has to go down that way, right
exactly.
from out of it.
Straight through then
Right.
Pakistan, I guess,
Yeah.
to the Indian Ocean.
Uh-huh.
And then, of course, the other commercial interest was Iraq for not only oil, but I think for just a geopolitical positioning there. And, it's
from
pretty
the
clear.
70s, Mr. Wolf was talking about that, from the 70s.
Yeah, and also...
Not just recently,
so,
the 70s.
Right.
And he's part of a right-wing, and it's also Likudnik connection to the Israeli existential situation they see themselves in order to, how do you address these wogs?
Yeah.
As the Western imperialists or colonialist people tend to see the native populations around the world. It was a neo-colonial kind of attitude.
Very much.
Toward the world, don't you think?
Yes, absolutely,
Okay.
very much
For economic interest, by and large.
Yeah. And it's all about domination. And now, after the opposition, the other superpower, Russia, has been
imploded.
Imploded, has been disappeared there during the 80s.
Yeah.
These neocons, Paul Wolfowitz and the others, Richard Pearl, are under the assumption that the U.S. must exercise its singular role as the world's only superpower. So this is the type of agenda that is being carried out, and 9/11 was the trigger for them. And this is so important for people to understand. I would just urge everybody to inform themselves, inform others, and get active, because we are reaping the consequences like a whirlwind through the Patriot Act, and then more recently the Military Commissions Act, the loss of habeas corpus.
We don't need no stinking habeas corpus, over in the Sierra Nevada Radio Mountain.
This is not democracy, as you said. This is more tyranny.
Well, it's probably more of a political democracy or a social democracy than it is an economic democracy. It's very much a plutocracy.
Very much.
As is every country in the world.
And in terms of the framework of democracy that was envisioned by the founders, we're so far, and it's just rapidly disappearing in a more accelerated fashion as a result of 9/11. I think we can argue that because the pretext that's given, that we're in a state of war. For instance, look at the anti-war movement, the protesters, the Republican National Convention here, where thousands upon thousands, probably close to 1 million people were here and put in free speech zones. What's going on?
Pens. They were like you ever go to the Union Stockyard? You ever go to the Stockyard Inn or the Stockyards in Chicago?
Right.
And they're all packed in there. It was sort of like that, in a way.
Right.
Yeah.
So we need free speech zones now. These are just a few of the consequences we've been reaping. So I urge everybody to get informed. Here's a great book to start with, The New Pearl Harbor.
That's Mr. Griffin.
By David Ray Griffin.
Yeah. Impeccable academic credentials.
Yes.
Theologian. Yeah.
And incredible analyst, researcher, and this is a primer. This is a must-read.
Yeah.
Also, there's an article by him that you can Google on the internet. It's called The 571-Page Lie by David Ray Griffin. And it's about an 8-page document.
Strong language for a man of the cloth.
Yes.
Or that deals with the cloth, yeah.
Oh, he gets even stronger.
Yeah.
Gets even stronger than this. But if you read this document, Harold, he lists 115 errors, omissions, and deceptions in the 9/11 Commission report.
I wonder if this is a good time for us to say, for people reviewing, you're used to people that are involved in this movement and everything, but a lot of people, a major premise in a certain sense that is really hard for people to assimilate is the idea that the bringing down of the towers down in 9/11, 2001, was instigated in part, large part perhaps, by people within the United States government and geopolitical power system.
Sure.
That's an assumption. That's a major premise on your part.
I will ask.
Now that's very hard for people to swallow.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
they don't want to believe that.
Absolutely. So what people can ask themselves, these two things. Since steel frame buildings prior to and after 9/11 have never collapsed. Especially due to fire. Never collapsed other than controlled demolition. Okay. How does that weigh in your mind when you analyze that? Never before or since. Only on that day, three steel frame buildings collapsed, and most people don't even know about the third one, Building 7, not even hit by an airplane. That fell 8 hours after at 5:20. And we're going to show some footage on that in a second. But one other point to raise. David Ray Griffin actually pointed out there are about like 11 or 12 characteristics of controlled demolition.
Maybe spell out controlled demolition. That's where they bringing a building down. It's highly skilled to bring a building down in its own footprint. When you're demolishing a building for reasons of clearing and that kind of thing.
Through the placement.
It's an art form.
It's a science,
and it's very involved.
It's very involved, and there aren't that many companies that can do that. Although there are units within, I think, the military that are very, very skilled at doing it. So if you ask yourself, how could three buildings again collapse, meeting every characteristics of controlled demolition? How could that be? What else could explain it? And the speed, just these 2 points, the speed of the collapse, according to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which was the officially sanctioned agency to investigate why the towers fell. That's called NIST. They said the South Tower fell in 9 seconds, North Tower in 10 seconds. South Tower fell in after burning for 52 minutes. And the fires were going out, and I'll point this out as well. And then the North Tower fell in 102 minutes. Now, other buildings, steel frame buildings, one in Philadelphia, one in Caracas, Venezuela, another one in LA, burned for much, much longer. One is as long as 18, 19 hours.
And even at hotter temperatures.
Yes, much bigger fires. And they did not collapse or fail.
It's never happened before.
No.
And it would seem to defy, when you get into temperatures, and Mr. Jones talks about thermite and everything, it defies the laws of physics.
Absolutely. And also the
that
towers,
they would have happened without controlled demolition.
It defies the laws of physics. And you know, all you have to know, I think, and in my estimation, is a little bit of high school level physics. You have speed of gravity and resistance. And there was no resistance, virtually no resistance, for the way these towers fell, because they fell in a virtual free fall, meaning that every floor, for instance, the buildings are, the two towers, North and South Tower, 110 stories tall.
That's right,
They fell, it will average out to about a second, 11 floors per second. Of 11 floors per second. So if you count 1 second, that's 1,001. That's 11 floors just disintegrated. So the speed is one thing, and the other major point is the fires, again, were never large enough.
Or hot enough.
Never large or hot enough,
what it takes for structural steel to melt.
Exactly. Exactly.
So compromise the structural integrity.
Exactly. So I have some footage, Harold.
So okay, that's good. We'll show that footage, and that is a thing. And then what about the idea of how? So your premises, the premise of Ray Griffin and others, increasing numbers, Stephen J. Jones and so on, is that there was the use of controlled demolition to bring them down. There's no way fellas from you know, from Iraq or from Arabia or something could have come and smuggled their way in to set the carefully necessary thing in order for that to happen.
Correct.
And this is never mentioned in any of the official reports by which, you know, so that's
right. Building 7. Building 7 was not even mentioned in the 9/11 Commission report, the Keene, Hamilton, Zelikow report, and NIST still does not have a report on why Building 7 fell. Now this is April here, 2006. Okay, it's It's more than 5.5 years.
Yeah.
I believe the first investigation, well, FEMA was there making comments about Building 7. They made a comment saying that it's highly unlikely that the diesel tanks in the towers caused the collapse. And then very shortly after, the investigation was passed off to NIST. They've been at this a long time, and
Yeah.
officially since I think it's 2004. Now I went to four different hearings I went to, and still they do not have a report on why Building 7 collapsed.
Yeah, and I think 87% of the people in the United States want to have that report, that investigation reopened.
That's a good point.
I mean, that's the general. That's the general population.
84%.
Is that correct?
Well, 84% of the American population thinks that the government is either lying, hiding something, or complicit. And I'm sure a majority of those people would favor a new investigation. As a matter of fact, here in New York City, we're looking at methods to get that to actually happen. Maybe a New York-based investigation. So I want to urge everybody to go to our website, ny911truth.org, and you'll see some information. There's an image on the left side that talks about the investigation, or you can go to nyc911initiative.org.
Okay, good, yeah.
And also you could call, if you don't have the internet, you can call our hotline number, which is 212-714-7147.
Good, okay, that's all good. Now, what were the three things that you said that 84% of the people, that's a national survey?
National survey.
Thought that there was what?
That the government was either lying, hiding something, or actually complicit. Yes.
Now, those are
and this
three
was
things.
a CBS New York Times poll that came out last October.
Well, that's the thing, if I may, and we want to get to the film. We're going to show it in just a second. But that's the thing that indicates a basic distrust of the system. I mean, in that. So that's 84%.
Yes.
And if you were to say, let's say there are some questions that haven't been adequately addressed by citizens who don't take that position, just that we want to know there should be more fill in, it would probably get up close to 100% of the people of the United States would like to have something along the lines of filling out more, that truth, that kind of thing.
And it's so important for everybody
and it's such
to
a
realize.
defining incident, incident in our history and so forth. It's a really important thing, and there's very little happening along those lines. And if you've been branded as a conspiracy nut, lunatic, fringe, or something for bringing it up, if you bring it up just not on the idea that there was complicit or there's blame or there's political content, just that there are facts, the facts man, like Joe Friday would say, about a thing that is so definitive, there would probably be almost universal support for the idea that we ought to have an investigation beyond what's been presented by our leadership, don't you think?
Yeah.
Or am I wrong in that?
I think that there is majority
without the
of
assumption of guilt.
I would say a majority of people that absolutely realize.
You know what I mean?
There's widespread knowledge, Harold, that the 9/11 investigation was very, very faulty. That the fact that it took 14 months and it would only have happened after 14 months after the event.
And wasn't it?
It only happened due to the pressure of some of the 9/11 widows.
Yeah.
And then they put Henry Kissinger as
the
the chairman, and they underfunded it. They obstructed it. Bush and Cheney would only testify in private and together, not separately, and not under oath.
And
so these are all telltale signs.
Wasn't it under the careful direction of Mr. Zelikow?
Yes,
whose official position is to create myths?
Yes.
That's his official MSO, they would say, in the military occupational specialty.
His background is
to create
the creation of myths upon the American, national audiences. And furthermore,
it's almost
Zelikow,
the absurd.
It is. It is. Zelikow, by the way, he worked in the Bush 1 White House.
Right.
And then he was part of the transition team for the Bush 2 White House, and he co-wrote a book with Condoleezza Rice. He had to actually recuse himself from participating at some point, and also Jamie Gorelick too. And so these are all telltale signs, and the American public is well aware. I think that there was huge gaps and inconsistencies. Furthermore, Keene and Hamilton, Thomas Keene, Lee Hamilton, the co-chairs, came out with a book last summer called, let's see, Without Precedent.
Right.
in which they wrote, this is a big story, this is in the Washington Post, they wrote how they were lied to about the timeline of the interceptor jets, the NORAD response.
How that defense system and that, you know,
Right.
you can go a long way and say, well, there are happenstance and everything, but it gets to be beyond the canon.
yeah.
And this idea about how just the
It's amazing.
investigation shouldn't necessarily be blamed for it,
Yeah.
but just that the facts, ma'am,
Yeah.
you know, the facts, I think you would get wide support. But listen, one of the problems is just we don't have much time. We only have an hour to talk about a subject we could talk 20 hours on. But you've got some film
Yes.
that we hope it works okay. We had a
Yes.
little problem. I hope it works, but it's on a DVD.
Yes.
And maybe you could talk about that first clip that if it works all right, we'll
Sure,
run that. And
sure.
then you're going to try and talk over it, I think.
Yes.
But maybe you could, as they say, set it up.
Okay, what we're going to show is about 6 minutes of film of the collapse of the towers, the 3 towers. First, you'll see the South Tower, then the North Tower, then Building 7. And I would just urge everybody to look at the speed, watch the speed of the collapse and the shape from the very top where you see these huge arch-shaped explosions. If it was just a gravity collapse, everything would go straight down.
And don't they have some coming out
and
from
you'll
the side
see also,
too?
yeah, the ejections are called squibs. You'll see
And
those as well.
there is a narrative on the tape?
There is.
So you may try and talk over it,
Yes.
and we hope it works. And if it doesn't work, we'll come right back to talk.
Exactly.
We're talking with Les Jamieson, one of the stalwart members of the New York 9/11 Truth movement. So we could set up that tape and run it now. I guess it runs 5-6 minutes, and
Right.
maybe let's see if that tape will work for us now, that DVD.
Here we are. It's the North Tower.
So I think our mics are open, and we can't hear. Maybe you could bring the sound in here if you can feel it from the...
Okay, look at that. See
Okay, yeah.
the shape of the top there?
Yeah, you can talk over it.
Tower.
I can't hear the narrative, but... Oh, there it is. I think it's there. Okay, you talk, Les. We're getting a little reverberation. We're a little too high, fellas. You got to bring it down a little. So there's an explosion, huh? Another one?
Now, there are the squibs, those ejections in the circles. Several of them.
There's one
Look
going
at
out
that,
lateral.
it's a huge one. And see how far down below the actual line of the collapse these are? 2 right there. Watch this.
That looked awfully like an explosion, didn't it? That looked like one there, too. These are not doctored photos or anything.
No.
This is
the footage from look at that fire exploding right there. Look at the shape of this.
all of this is consistent with what they call controlled demolition.
Now, it's going to show some footage about Building 7. And I just want everybody to consider that this footage was only showed the night of 9/11. After that, it has been completely...
This was on national TV?
Yes.
It was taken from footage. There was an awful lot of footage taken of that thing.
We
Every
haven't
camera
seen
in the world was...
No, it was shown the night of 9/11, and this building has not really been shown since. I think one time on Scarborough Country I heard of it. But Stephen Jones was being interviewed by...
What is that?
That was
Oh, I see.
footage
From
on the right side was Building 7.
This is from Hoboken.
Yes.
Yeah.
More in Building
But there were thousands of cameras focused on that. They wouldn't have gotten more film of those explosions if, because all the cameras in the world were focused on that by that time.
On Building 7, there weren't that many people that knew it was coming down.
Was that where we saw those Building 7?
That's Building 7 right now.
And that's the one where we saw the squibs coming out?
No.
No, it was not.
No,
Okay.
that was the towers, the north and south tower.
Okay. And they want us to understand that it was the airplane, the fire from the airplanes that caused the building to pancake down and like
Right, with the north and south.
demolition.
But no plane hit this one. We're on Building 7 now.
All right. That's where Mr. Giuliani had his office, or the government had a secret
Now look at the
service?
top, on the left. Look at the top. See how it just sinks in?
Things, yeah, all right. Oh, you took it back up now, okay.
See, do that.
Is there narrative on this?
Yes.
We're not getting it in here, but okay. Okay. And then it goes down. Wow. Look at that. And that's never
Straight
happened.
down, symmetric. in its own footprint.
Didn't
Into a
Mr.
small
Silverstein
small
say
rubble pile.
he had a telephone thing where he said
Yeah,
he said
it's
they're
coming
going to
up.
pull the building. He used that term. That's a term they use
Yes.
for controlled demolition. Pull
Yes.
the building.
Yes, it's coming
That
up.
could have been an accident or something. Huge.
A lot of questions about that.
People starting to run away.
Oh, here
from
we're
the
not
scene,
getting it.
And I turned in time to see what looked like a skyscraper implosion. Looked like it had been done by a demolition crew. The whole thing just collapsing down on itself, and another big, huge plume of gray and white smoke shooting up into the air, and then more of the smoke billowing up the street here.
Once again, our definition of a pyroclastic flow. Hot gases carrying dust and debris flow along the ground with a fluid motion. It requires explosive energy to generate the necessary heat, dust, and debris. Turbulence and fluidization of debris are characteristic.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Around the area, New Jersey Transit outbound Hoboken terminal operating on a load-and-go basis, no inbound service, and also at a Newark Penn Station, limited service on the northeast corner and North Jersey coastlines and the Raritan line as well, and limited service from Penn Station at New York into Penn Station at Newark, and no service into the city on New Jersey Transit. Also, New Jersey Transit operating.
Is that the end of that thing?
Yeah.
Is it going to get that?
Good.
Okay, that'll be the end. We're not on camera yet, but okay, that's it. So you had that. There we are, back with Leslie and everything. He said, if Mr. Silverstein, that's a term that's used to pull the building. You can bring the mic down now, or to pull the. They don't, as a matter of course, equip buildings. Because to pull a building, it takes a careful. You have to do that deliberately. They don't, in the construction, have built-in systems that would make it easy for that pulling process to go on or something. You know what I mean?
Well,
but they would have had to have people who were able. I know there's stories about how there were people who were related to Mr. Bush who had a crew that was in that building and so forth, but they don't, as a matter of course, have that built into the construction of major buildings when they're going to have to be pulled in 40 years, you know, and have it ready.
If that were the case, wouldn't they have used that as an explanation? Instead, we have this incredible open question of how this building could have fallen, especially in that manner.
Yeah.
So if there were some pre-placed explosions as part of the construction,
yeah,
they would have been laid out.
It's part of a design thing
Yeah.
that people do now, because the building's going to have to come down sometime, and we'll build it in as we build the building. You know what I'm reaching for, Les, is did you ever realize how incredibly coincidental it is? Like it was coincidental that they had a thing where the Air Force was out over the ocean. They had a war games thing going. They had just transferred the power over to Mr. Cheney to make the decision. All these things are coincidental, and that makes people very suspect. But do you realize how coincidental it is that anything exists? The parameters within which, say, for instance, you and I are sitting here, it's just almost geologically impossible that anything could exist. What it took to happen in the evolution of everything in our universe, it's just totally improbable. So we have to give a lot of we want to give a lot of leeway to the possibility of coincidental things happening that don't necessarily add up to a conspiracy, but just things that took place in a certain kind of serendipitous way. You know, you want to give that kind of leeway in terms of, do you understand what I'm saying? Or certainly the population, the general population, is going to have that view, because the general population does not want to accept the idea that such a horrendous thing could be carried out by the institution that they're related to.
But going back to all the previous examples of government crimes, treasonous crimes, which resulted in launching of wars based on false provocations. Also, if you research the event called Operation Northwoods, which was a plan in 1962 to create a terrorist event resulting in the deaths of Americans in order to, again, manipulate Americans to thinking, in this case, Cuba has attacked us to provide pretext to invade Cuba and remove Castro. When you look at the history, you know, we can't consider all these events leading up to 9/11 as coincidence. There's just far too many. You got to ask yourself at what point do you say, wait a minute, there couldn't have been, you know, 86 coincidences that resulted here. I'm making up a number. There were an awful lot.
There were a lot more coincidences.
I could go on for so many hours.
There are a whole lot more coincidences of that seem totally impossible that made possible this Earth. Just in the formation of the universe. It was just incredibly impossible almost to have it. But anyway, I'm just trying to reach for something that could be able to give the greatest possible leeway to the general citizenry who still is going to want to have an investigation of what it, we can study all those things, and we study them in the name of science in terms of a larger truth and so forth. And then also putting this in a larger context of what would it mean to the national psyche or the world psyche if this stuff is correct, and would it be so traumatizing that it's something that geopolitical or political leaders simply cannot allow to happen because it would be so cataclysmic to the world psyche.
Okay. I believe it was FDR that made the statement. No, it might have been Wilson, Woodrow Wilson, made the statement that in politics, nothing happens by accident. When something happens, it was designed. So this is going back, you know, to the 30s and 40s here. So when you look at his example, his statement, who would know better than this president? Now,
who was that?
I think it was Woodrow Wilson.
Eisenhower warned against the military-industrial complex.
Of course. So
and
you add those two. The first statement saying in politics nothing happens by accident, and you add the Eisenhower statement that beware of the undue influence of the military-industrial complex.
Are there any overriding context that would make it right for the real truth of this thing that you're asserting, or the 9/11 truth, or that kind of thing, to be suppressed?
Are there any
overriding?
That could oppress this?
That
the media is trying to suppress this. The major media.
No, I'm not talking about that they are, but is there anything, a larger issue, or is it that they are doing these kind of things? Let's say they're doing things like they have this concept of a rat in the corner, and it may be you've got a march of history, you've got 200,000 years of human history, and the United States of America sees itself and its citizens see themselves as, in a historical sense, legitimate. The legitimate movement of history. It's like a surviving species out of a process by which most of the species die. That they have a truth that is so important, it's a fundamentalist idea, that the world not lose faith in that structure which keeps the whole system together and avoids a massive chaotic kind of unleashing of anarchistic nihilism or something, because there's no alternative. So they feel we have to protect this until there is some alternative by which the ongoing movement of history and the evolution of consciousness, and if it's unleashed, if we don't protect it, it's going to be a devastation, and we now have weapons that can destroy the species. Larger issues that are involved, rather than the fact that some people tried to do an experiment that was politically, it's absolutely necessary. They had to hoodwink the people in order to pull it off like Roosevelt did. That kind of a thing that gives an explanation to why they have to keep it suppressed until we have a vision that's adequate to fill that gap of the historical sweep of history's evolutionary pattern.
Here's how I would answer that, Harold, is they've had the technology for at least 100 years, you know that.
Of what?
To have the world live in abundance, and you know, with clean, abundant energy, which of course is the engine that drives everything from food to housing to all the survival aspects of humanity. They've had this for 100 years.
I don't think we've had it for 100 years, if I may. I don't think we've had it. We had about 35.
Tesla.
About 35 years, I would say. But that's okay.
Tesla, and then of course Buckminster Fuller.
Bucky Fuller zeroed in on the age about the year 1970 that we crossed that line.
Well, no, Fuller, prior to World War II, he was already way ahead of it with
Well, he made a projection from 1952 that we're going to cross the 50% mark and transcend scarcity about 1970. At the same time, the weapon systems that have evolved are such that Michio Kaku and others will tell us that if they're unleashed now, it's not like we're playing with, firecrackers anymore. It would mean, apparently, the program that's going to air on Monday following this, or aired, he's saying that if the weapons are there, it would, in fact, mean, he can know, he studied with Teller, the end of our whole species.
Absolutely.
You see, there's larger issues at play here.
Absolutely.
In terms of the need to hold on to a conservative system that holds the system together until we get an organizational assumption for operating banjo for Spaceship Earth that's effective, that they don't have, and they feel trapped.
Yes.
Like rats in a corner.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
But
so that's a larger issue than who did something bad.
What they want, though, is not the better welfare of humanity. They could have had it. They could have had it. From an existential, philosophical, spiritual viewpoint, we've had the concepts and the principles for centuries of the best ways that humanity can function from the highest principles and teachings and guidance of phenomenal, holy people and teachings throughout
Well, we maybe had that since Jesus, some people would say, or Buddha, or we've had our spiritual leaders.
Right. And then you combine that with the Industrial Revolution, in the 1700s, and then you have the science to back up and provide for the physical well-being and survival of the species. Then you have science, of course, through medicine, and then you have the science again through the energy advances and breakthroughs. I will especially point out Nikola Tesla. And he was aware of this boundless, clean, abundant energy system. And it was the machinations of J.P. Morgan who prevented Tesla's technology.
Well, J.P. Morgan may have been following on the same principle that it is important that the sense of the movement of history has a legitimacy, a historical legitimacy. If the faith in the legitimacy of the system, the movement of history, on a large level, is undercut and you have chaos breaking out, that's a larger issue, and he may have had the same sense. We've got to maintain this system until there's one in place that's effective with a qualitative transformation that is coming, but we don't have the vision of how we can achieve it. They don't have a vision of how to operate things for the benefit of everybody, a liberated vision. We don't have it. It's not enunciated. It's not understood by them. So they're going to have to take measures to protect that which we have inherited. And so that's a larger issue by which they have to pull these shenanigans because they don't have a vision of how to operate the system, nor do the critics have a vision of how the system is going to operate in a liberating context for all of humanity and the ecology.
How about...
You understand what I'm saying? It's
yes,
a larger issue of responsibility to keep hoodwinking the people until we get that vision.
Yes. But the vision, I say, has existed in principle.
Who is it? Who's the vision? Who has given the operating manual for Spaceship Earth that makes sense? We're still fighting over the same principles, and we don't have anything. That's what I'm trying to say.
No,
there is a vision. We don't have a vision.
The principles have existed for centuries. Again, through the highest spiritual teachings that we have. But and these men, men of power and influence, that are all about domination, just like these neocons have articulated, their actions have been for the profit motive. I'll give you a perfect example.
Well, okay.
Hearst. You know the story of hemp. I just learned this myself recently. Hemp is a product that you can make clothes from material, oil, energy, all these things.
It could be a biofuel now.
It could be a biofuel.
Yeah.
It's outlawed, though. Why is it outlawed?
Marijuana?
Why is it outlawed?
It's associated with marijuana.
No.
It was fiber.
I'll tell you why. It was outlawed because the Hearst family, William Randolph Hearst, had land with lumber. And for his newspaper conglomerate, he would rather have that land harvested for lumber, and it would have cost him money if hemp was used for paper rather than his lumber and his paper pulp.
Well, there's probably been a lot of
So
things like
this
that.
it's profit motive. That's what everything comes down to.
Well, yeah, but we're talking philosophically in a sense, beyond that.
Right.
Beyond just that.
No, we're
That's,
talking about
there's very machinations of that. I suppose
Yeah.
the emperors had a rationale for the slavery in the empire.
Right.
And the
Not
kings
the betterment,
of Europe.
the betterment of
and now you've
humankind
got
or managing or controlling, keeping things going in a pattern until we figure out the best ways to exist together.
Right. Well, there might be a rationale in terms of a responsible rationale for hoodwinking the people. Because until they have, you understand what I'm saying? I'm trying to get behind a larger context for understanding this whole 9/11 truth.
Yeah, no, I know.
Right.
I understand.
And what there is, it may be at a very high level of responsibility that people said, look, we can't let this thing go. We have to keep the order of the system, and we don't have. Did you understand what I was saying or not?
Yeah,
And
I
that
do.
may
I
be
know-
a
I know
higher
exactly.
order
Yeah.
than the fact that
Yeah.
they brought down a building. Maybe
But-
they had to bring down the building in order, we used to say in
Yeah.
Vietnam, you have to burn the village to save it.
Yeah.
That kind of rationale would be going on in their head. And there may be something to that. There might be something to that. Because we don't have a vision of how to operate
Now
in
we
a
do.
new context
We
other
do.
than that which we've been having
Now,
out of history.
The vision.
Whose vision is it?
If you took away the control from the international conglomerates who control energy, finance, and the war-making machine, the peoples of the world want to coexist peacefully, and would. They would.
Well.
It's if it were not for a few dominant, power-hungry, controlling interests who want to keep that power.
Well, that's
and
an assumption.
they're operating Spaceship Earth for their own benefit, as opposed to the betterment of everybody. Because tomorrow, starting tomorrow, with technology for clean, green, abundant, affordable energy. I'll refer you to a documentary that was out a year ago called "Who Killed the Electric Car?"
Yes,
I'll
I've
get
heard
you
of
a
that. I
copy.
got to see it. Have you got that?
I do.
I want to see it.
I
Or
will-
is it up on the web?
I will
Is it
get
up on YouTube?
I'm
or
not
anything?
sure, but
I've
I'll
heard
get you
that
a
was
copy.
really
It's a
interesting,
perfect
yeah.
example
Right.
of the point I'm making,
Right,
where
right.
they could make electric cars,
Right.
which will do away with this global warming issue, will be much more affordable, clean, and the upkeep of the cars is much less than the
Right.
Combustion engine.
Right.
So that's just a perfect
Yeah,
example.
there are
and I could
people.
go
Yeah, but
on
there are
and
a
on.
lot of people come along. They say it's going to be ponds, coal fusion. There's other kinds of things that we could have, and this kind of. But it isn't in place, and the system that is in place keeps the lights going, and that sort of thing. What I'm trying to reach
In this
for,
film, you'll
what
see
I'm trying
why
to
the
reach
system's not in
for,
place,
what I'm
though.
trying to reach for is there's
Yes.
been a lot of people Darwinistic,
Yes.
competition, that sort of thing. It's like mafia dons fighting for territory
Yes.
and operating protection rackets in order to keep people in line. That's the politics.
Yes.
That's what we've inherited.
Yes.
James Joyce said history is a nightmare,
Yes.
from which I'm attempting to awaken.
Yes.
It is a nightmare coming, and we
Yes.
may be coming to a time when we get to a point where we can destroy the whole species.
Yes. Yes.
Couldn't do it in our lifetime, Les.
Yes.
There's an existential new thing. There's something existentially significant on the other side that is positive, perhaps, and that has not been able to find itself into the conscience, because if you're going to question everything, like, for instance, you're going to get to where there's enough for everybody and that sort of thing, all of our institutions will fall apart. They're all based upon,
Scarcity.
Scarcity, and they're all based upon the authoritarian nature of the structure of all our institutions and everything, the corporation, the schools, the education. You're going to distribute income according to ways where everybody's a slave. They're going to all of a sudden not be a slave. You have to have a system to handle that new condition of liberation, and we don't have it in place, so don't start broken the boat until we get it in place. Do you understand? That's a higher responsibility that even these people who are doing this neocon thing would have say that they're doing, because you can't let there be let loose anarchy on the world, and we haven't got our act together yet.
Well, there's anarchy now when you look at their war
Not
agenda.
anarchy.
When you look
The
at
lights
war,
go on.
When you look at the war agenda, the lights go on, but in the meantime, $1 trillion is gone from our national treasury. How many hundreds of thousands of lives are affected around the planet? No, this is. I don't see this as order. And in terms of
But do you think?
in terms of managing a system where everybody gets to live, which Buckminster Fuller totally envisioned again years ago. I refer you to his book, Utopia or Oblivion.
It's chapter and verse. I've got that one down.
Yeah. I mean, he just spells it out. Just through the increase of 12% increase of energy and materials, everybody on the planet would have their basic needs attended.
Well, he put a call out for an operating manual for Spaceship Earth in terms of our transcending scarcity, and it has not emerged. The assumption is still the same that we've had through 200,000 years of human history, that we have to fight and hit each other on the head and do this, and nothing, there's never given any, you never hear it on the news, you never hear it anywhere, that the ontology, that the larger ontology has been transformed, and an explanation for that, or reason why we should have a system that is based upon a different basic ontologic reality. That's not voiced, ever. It's only just who's to blame, out of the blame kind of thing coming out of history, and there's a higher responsibility not to let loose the beast. The beast that will destroy the whole species and a good deal of the ecology. Larger issues are in play than which political don has still overstepped the bounds of trying to assert their way of doing it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I think that I'm detecting...
you're going to have to get a system that's going to be so appropriate to the liberation of the whole of the species, which is not liberated. We're enslaved to outdated systems. And it's also going to be a liberating of the ecological thing. You're going to have to qualitative transformation, and the big challenge is going to be a system that is so comprehensively appropriate to the evolution of universal consciousness. We may be coming to a new relationship to broader intellectual consciousness of the universe. We may be transcending human society, human evolution, but it's going to have to be so right and so appropriate and so inclusive that it'll include even those responsible for the outdated historical institutions, and we don't have that. We're still caught up within dialectic thinking, which is outdated and disastrous, perhaps.
I mean,
so you're going to have to include them in the pattern.
We're in a self-destruction mode.
Yeah, we don't want that.
Very badly. And in terms of coming up with the theory,
alternative,
the philosophy, the solutions for the alternative, you know what? If it was seen as a priority to provide those alternatives, if it was seen as a priority by the world's leaders, but
they're not coming up with
the political, because they don't see it as a priority.
Well, so then the responsibility calls
their agenda is full spectrum dominance.
Yes, but that's because they do not have it. So it's not their fault.
No, it
isn't. You don't blame a lion for eating an antelope. It's not their fault. You know whose fault it is? It's our fault, intellectuals or the progressives, for not coming up with an effective alternative.
No,
that's my thinking.
I say it is their fault as well as our fault.
Well,
it's our fault for allowing this, but it's their fault for using obsolete paradigms of thinking.
Well, it's our fault for not presenting them with an effective challenge to the obsolete paradigm in a way that's going to be able to be inclusive of them, rather than cutting off their heads like Louis XVI. We got to come up with an alternative, and we haven't done it. We've had people try.
How about that? How about they don't want the alternative?
Well, that's putting it there.
They don't want their
blame.
They want their agenda.
Well,
they don't want ours.
Well,
I don't think. Anyway.
Well, I think we better get our agenda ready in a way that can include them. No enemies. Except ignorance. Include them. I think that's the way we have to go, rather than trying to find out who the son of a gun is that's making all the trouble in the traditional way that politicians have dialectically done throughout all of history.
We can include anyone.